This video is sponsored by Flight Stars, located at Falcon Field in Mesa, Arizona. So I told you previously that we came back from some upset prevention and recovery training in Spinderella, and I also introduced the issue of the stick shaker in Colgan Air 3407. And I said that the pull on the yoke was not the beginning of the event, but rather the last link in the chain. So today we're going to talk through that whole chain, link by link. It helps us recognize when those chains are forming and gives us an opportunity to avoid a recurrence. That's the entire point of threat and error management. A quick foundation. I don't want to assume this is a training channel, so we want every level to understand this. So threat and error management is a framework. It comes out of crew resource management. It's an extension of that. And it sorts everything into three buckets: threats, errors, and undesired aircraft states. So let's talk about them a little bit. Threats are what comes from outside of you. That's the terrain, the weather, other people's errors, any traffic, for example, anything that's external to you that threatens the safety of flight. Errors are from inside. Those are the mistakes we make. They can be an action that we did incorrectly or inaction because we didn't do what we were supposed to do. So we could miss a checklist item, or we could make a poor decision. All those are errors. And undesired aircraft states are getting the airplane in a configuration or in a position we don't want it to be in. Low and slow, upside down, or landing gear up, for example. That's a configuration issue. That is how threat and error management's organized. February 2009, a regional turboprop, a Dash 8 Q400, on a night approach into Buffalo. Winter weather, ice in the air. On board, a two-person crew, a couple of flight attendants, and a cabin full of people who fully expected to be home for dinner. But minutes from the airport, the airplane stalls, rolls, and comes down into a house in Clarence Center, New York. Everyone on board and one person in that house is killed. 50 people. So we're going to treat this with the seriousness it's owed. We study it not to point at anybody. We study it so the same chain never forms in our cockpit. That's the deal. So let's start where threat and error management starts, at the threats. These are the external issues that we face. So threat one in the Colgan Air event was the environment. They were in known icing conditions. Now, known icing conditions is something we can manage, but it does require our attention and our monitoring and our skills. It changes the airplane. We know it raises stall speed and it reduces our margins. Threat two is directly related to the aircraft, and now we're talking about the autopilot. So the autopilot can mask what the airplane is experiencing. It's, for example, in this case, trying to hold altitude, and it's doing so and sacrificing indicated airspeed, but it's subtle. It's doing it very slowly, knot by knot, and it can result in a stick shaker or a stall warning, because the airplane can actually get that slow without you realizing it unless you're directly monitoring it consistently. Threat three, in this case, fatigue. Been a long day for the crew. They commuted in from Florida. It's been quite a day. They've got a tough schedule. And throw in what they're dealing with, the challenges with the weather, and it's again, it shrinks the margin of your ability to make good quality decisions. Threat four is the qualification history. So this is the one none of us like to talk about, but the captain had a history of check ride failures. It raises questions. It raises questions about screening pilots, about flight standards and training, whether that training program and standards program should have caught the faults and trapped them. It's not about one person. It's about the system and how well it does in trapping these threats. So look at that. A single mistake, it's made 4 threats already in the cockpit. The cheese holes are starting to line up already. Now let's talk about the errors. This is the crew's own actions. Watch how each one shortens the runway for the next one. Error one is the sterile cockpit. So the sterile cockpit rule says that below 10,000 feet, we're supposed to only have conversations that are relevant to the operation and safety of the flight. But this crew actually got into an extended conversation about other subjects. The weird thing was they were actually talking about icing, the subject that was threatening them, but they weren't talking about it in the context of resolving the issue that they had. They were just chatting. And it's kind of ironic because while they're doing that, the airplane's just getting slower and slower and slower. Error 2, configuration. So the flaps weren't sequenced correctly for the approach. Configuration management is part of our energy management responsibility. When the airplane isn't configured like you expect it to be, your speeds and your margin are different than you expect. So another small little hole in the cheese. Error 3, the response to the shaker. This is a big one. The airplane gets slow enough that the stick shaker activates. That's the airplane saying, hey, you're about to stall, do something. Get the nose down. And the Q400 even has a stick pusher. So when it detects that you're slow enough, it will move the stick forward for you to help you. It will physically push the nose down. The captain pulls back fully and overrides the stick pusher, which took a lot of force, and he overrode the airplane's attempt to save itself. I want you to sit with that for just a second, because it's really a big part of the lesson. The correct response to a stall in a Dash 8, in a Cessna 172, and a 787 like I fly, and in Spinderella that you saw in the earlier video, it's the same. Reduce the angle of attack. Push. It's the most fundamental reflex in flying. And under the fatigue and the threats that this crew was facing, the failure to maintain a sterile cockpit, they did the opposite thing, and the holes in the Swiss cheese lined up. Error 4, the first officer retracted the flaps to 0 after the airplane stalled. She's trying to help, but retracting the flaps is the exact opposite of what you need. Now it raises the stall speed and makes the stall even deeper. Made it dramatically worse. Error 5, nobody flew the procedure. So there's a published stall recovery for the airplane. Like every airplane you've flown, it exists, it's trained, we practice it, and in the moment, neither pilot executed it. Not because they didn't know it existed, but because startle, fatigue, and a broken scan got in front of it. Here's where the chain runs out of room. The aerodynamic stall happened about 2,300 feet above the ground. That's the cruelest number in the whole discussion, because 2,300 feet's nothing. It's just not enough room for a recovery. There's just nothing left. The airplane entered a uncommanded roll, and it came down in a residential neighborhood. The NTSB was very direct in their findings. They said, and I quote, the captain's inappropriate response to the stick shaker was the primary cause of the accident. That's pretty attention-getting. But you and I have just spent a few minutes watching everything that had to stack up before he even put his hands on the yoke. The single input was just the last link. It was not the only one. Here's the part I don't want to skip. The accident didn't just generate a report from the NTSB and go on the shelf. The families of the people that airplane went to Washington, and they wouldn't stop. They were serious. And the aviation you fly in today is different because of them. The requirement that the airline's first officer now has to hold an ATP came out of that. The 1,500-hour rule that requires you to have that level of experience to get to an airline level job all goes back to this accident. The hard look at fatigue, duty and rest rules, the generation at FAR 117 all have connections to this accident. A lot of things happen because of this. So when we ask why do we study these older accidents, they're important. They're important to understand our framework. They're important, most important, to prevent a recurrence. 50 people died. A group of families definitely didn't want this to end without getting something out of it. So the rules were rewritten. And the least we can do is learn that lesson and apply it in our flying. So we're back with Spinderella. And you may ask, well, I fly a small airplane like this, or a 172, or a Diamond DA-40. Why does this stuff matter to me? We're looking at airline accidents. Well, it does matter. We do, for example, because of accidents like that, upset prevention and recovery training in this airplane. You should come out and do it with us. It's a lot of fun. We learn to respond to stalls in unusual attitudes. We also talk about sterile cockpit procedures, and we can apply that to general aviation flying just as well. When we're holding short of the runway, we should be thinking and listening and not doing idle chit-chat. We talk about fatigue mitigation. We know that sometimes we're on our way home and we're tired. We need to think about how to deal with that threat. Energy management, especially when the autopilot's on. Are we monitoring the airplane to make sure the airplane's in a state that we want it to be in? See, threat and error management, or TEM as we call it, it's not a checklist. It's a philosophy for how to fly the airplane. So always remember to like, comment, subscribe, and don't forget, think safe, act safe, stay safe. I'm Safety Chip.